The following feature presentation is part of the Skywalking Network.
Welcome to Star Warsologies, the podcast about science and other academic fields of study seen in Star Wars. My name is Melissa Miller. I'm one of your co-hosts. I'm a science writer, and I also do freelance writing for Star Wars Insider magazine.
And I'm your other co-host, James Floyd. I am a freelance Star Wars writer and the author of Star Wars crossword puzzles and other word games from a galaxy far, far away. This episode, Star Warsologies, is going to talk about space exploration and Star Wars. Our guest today is Catherine Winchell, a Mars rover operator, astrogeologist, and head organizer of the Star Wars Expanded Universe Convention Legacy Expo this September. Hi, Catherine.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
We are super excited.
Yes, lots of fun topics to get into. I'm really excited to hear more about the convention as well. Yeah, let's dive right into at least a little bit of your Star Wars background. What does Star Wars mean to you? Did it contribute to your choice of careers?
Yeah, it absolutely contributed to my choice of careers. I really started getting into Star Wars in middle school, which was about the same time that I really started getting into space. I did grow up with Star Wars a bit. My dad showed me the original trilogy, and we got like 80% of the way through Phantom Menace when I was homesick with pneumonia when I was 5. And then my mom came home like right as they were breaking back into the palace, and she was just like, what are you showing her? Because like it was, shooting and violence and all this stuff, which, she wasn't really cool with for the 5-year-old. And so then, yeah, I was banned from Star Wars for a little bit, which was extremely sad. Yeah. As an aside, like I enjoyed the original trilogy, but the prequel trilogy, like the episode 1, I was never into like the princess movies and stuff as a kid. Like I just couldn't get into it. And in my little like 5-year-old brain, even though they were calling her Queen Amidala and, like her handmaidens were her handmaidens, in my mind these were all princesses. And I was like, okay, these are cool princesses. Like I can get behind these princesses. Where have these princesses been this whole time? Because I like these ones. Yeah. And it's funny that was my main takeaway from that movie, whereas now I'm really into like Jedi things, and I have zero memory of any of the Jedi stuff in that movie from the first time that I watched it. It was all just, wow, this is a cool princess.
That's so
but then in middle school, I found Ambush on Corellia in the back of the library and was like, whoa, there's Star Wars books. And I was a voracious reader already. So I tore through that, was super hyped about Jaina Solo, just the idea of like Leia and Han having a daughter, and she's awesome and she's a really cool pilot and like she can build things. Like I was obsessed. And yeah, just like really dove in on the Star Wars books. And that's really been like the main thing that has had me in the fandom. Like I enjoy the movies, I enjoy the TV shows, but the books and comics are really where like I'm obsessive about things. The main way that I first started interacting with the Star Wars community is through the global charity costume groups. Joined the Rebel Legion basically as soon as I turned 18. It's really affected the trajectory of my entire life and career because since I was joining that as an 18-year-old, and, that was also like when I was first starting college. So this was really like my first time out in the world as an adult by myself. And the mentorship that I received both in like, my sewing skills and crafting skills and stuff like that, but also just in life in general in those clubs that really benefited me. I took on a bunch of leadership roles just because there was nobody else who was able to. And it actually just kind of worked into my scientific career. I went to Western Washington University. They have an amazing planetary science program there. And we were going to have a science team meeting for the Mastcam-Z instrument on Perseverance. And somebody is added really late because there was a miscommunication. So it's the manager of this company who is going to be like staying in a hotel room with me when we do this trip out to Eastern Washington to look at some basalts that are very similar to Mars. And we're walking up the stairs to the room, and she has, that X-Wing pilot backpack that I think the Geek made? Yeah, she has that. And so the other female student who was going to be in that room too was like, you need to show her your costumes. And I was like, okay, cool, sure, So I start showing her pictures, and her background is in engineering. And so I'm showing her this Hera Syndulla costume that I made. And when I made that costume, silicone Lecu weren't a thing yet. They were only latex, and you can't take latex into Seattle Children's Hospital because of allergies. And I really wanted to be able to take that costume to Children's Hospital because, it's a kid's show. Like, she'll be popular, and she is extremely popular there.
Space Mom.
Space Mom, yeah. So I took neoprene, which is dive suit material, and I covered that in caulking, like that you use to like seal a tub.
Wow.
Yeah, stuffed that to give it kind of like a skin-ish texture. Used something to like weigh down the bottom and then stuffed it with fiberfill. And then I used a metal dryer vent to like exit my head at the right angle. It was an engineering piece,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I was showing that to this woman, and she was super impressed as, somebody with an engineering degree. And at the end of the meeting, she offered me a job. And I was like, well, I still have a whole another year to get my degree. And she's like, well, that's okay. Cause, Perseverance wasn't launching for a while. So, there was time.
Okay.
So yeah, I went into my senior year of college with a job offer already, pretty much entirely thanks to the stuff that I had done in the Star Wars community.
Wow.
Yeah. Star Wars continued to help me in that career. We use Sintra for armor in the costume clubs a lot. It's a thermoplastic. And we were doing calibration testing for the Mastcam Z instrument on Perseverance, and we suddenly needed a cone of very specific diameters on each end, and everybody was freaking out because you can't just get that, custom manufactured by tomorrow, except you can with Sintra and a heat gun. The stuff that I do with the Star Wars community and my Mars career are definitely tied together.
Oh, that makes me so happy.
What do you do as a Mars rover operator?
So I am a camera operator since my degree is in geology. The people who do instrument operations is a really wide range of backgrounds. We have people who are coming from a computer science background who mostly focus on like writing the scripts that we use. You have people coming from an engineering background who like really understand like how the cameras work and how the rover works. And then you have geologists who, we also need to understand the programming and the engineering, but what we're primarily helpful for is there's a phone line every day for rover operations, and scientists from all over the world who are on the team call into that phone line, and they look at the images that we got down from the night before, and they say, oh, I'm really interested in that conglomerate over there. Can we get, this kind of data from that? I liaise with the scientists. So there's uplink and downlink. Uplink is what I just described, where we're picking what we want to gather data from that day. And then downlink is when we receive the data, so doing the image processing and health and safety checks on the cameras, and how it's interacting with the rover, stuff like that. So for 5 years, I did uplink and downlink on the Curiosity rover. For a while, I was holding the record with two of my coworkers for the largest image ever taken on another planet. It was a 1.8 billion pixel image that we sequenced before Thanksgiving one year because the rover was going to be sitting in place for 4 days for Thanksgiving, which is rare. And so we took that opportunity to take this really high resolution panorama. We had to split it into 3 different sequences because it was so many commands. At the time, the music that I was jamming to was the Mandalorian soundtrack. It was just like the main theme for that was just playing the whole time that I was doing that. Also, just random Star Wars Mars thing. When you're writing the sequences, the last command is really important because that's what finishes the sequence. And it always just makes me smile a little bit when they're talking about the last command. It's just like, yep. The rover will kill Luke Skywalker. Okie dokie. Yeah.
Luke Skywalker, please do not go to Mars.
Yep. And then in 2023, I switched from that company to working at ASU, where I am now, and I'm doing Mastcam Z downlink there. So Mastcam Z is the next generation of the mast camera. The Z stands for zoom. So now we have a zoom lens rather than it being like 2 fixed focal lengths. Now the problem is that NASA's science budget is going to be cut by 47% with the 2026 presidential budget. That is going to be massive layoffs at every NASA facility. But I have a job here for now. I hope I can keep that job. Mars sample return, which was a huge part of the Perseverance mission, has been canceled. That is a huge bummer. That is at least 10 years of work of, preparing for it, not to mention the 5 years that we've been on Mars collecting these samples. If this is something that upsets you, please check out the Planetary Society. It was founded by Carl Sagan. Bill Nye runs it right now. They are NASA's main advocacy group. They have resources there that allow you to contact your representatives to tell them that, hey, this is a problem. This is in really bad shape right now. And it's really scary and really frustrating because, so much Mars and Perseverance, so much of that has been focused on sample return. That's a big part of this mission,
Right.
But we don't know if we're going to get them back. It's a huge loss for science and it just doesn't make any sense to me. So
yeah, no, you're not alone on that. When you said the sample collection, I was remembering this when I worked at Nerdist, and at least the first pictures, they looked like lightsaber hilts, these like sample collection things. I was like, is that on purpose a little bit? I mean, I'm sure it's actually practical and all that sort of stuff, but it was like the first thing that everyone sort of, at least at Nerdist, noticed in those pictures.
Yeah, no, I do not have direct contact with the engineering team for those, but I wouldn't be surprised. We're always sneaking stuff in. One of the Jupiter probes, the acronym that they worked for that was JEDI. For Ingenuity, so Ingenuity is the helicopter that was launched with Perseverance. It was a technical demonstration, which was really crazy because Mars both has much less of an atmosphere as Earth and it has less gravity. So powered flight on Mars is extremely different than flight on Earth.
Right.
But it went amazingly well. Ingenuity had 72 flights. But when Ingenuity finally crashed, it snapped one of the blades, which prevented it from being able to fly again. And feeling emotional about it, the team named that place Valinor Hills after the undying land of the elves in Lord of the Rings, Tolkien. So, we're a bunch of nerds. We're always trying to slip stuff in. Typically, there's a naming scheme. The one for Perseverance is national parks, and they really wanted to include national parks outside of the U.S. And I was like, cool, I bet I can find a Star Wars filming location that is near a national park. And it turns out that yes, in Tunisia, I believe it's pronounced Dahomis National Park is very near where they filmed several Tatooine sequences.
Nice.
So that I submitted that one as a potential national park. It ended up like way far on the map of Jezero Crater, so we're not going to get there. But there is part of Mars that is named after a national park that is, I think they filmed within the national park. But yeah, we're always trying to put stuff in, so it would not surprise me if there was a little bit of like, oh hey, yeah, we could make that look kind of like a lightsaber. But at the same time, it's a tube. Every tube is gonna, a roll of wrapping paper is a lightsaber. So
yeah, that's right. As soon as you started saying that, I'm like, not that my brother and I needed an excuse for something to make into a lightsaber, right? Like,
Exactly.
Well, how do you think space exploration might work in Star Wars Galaxy?
This is actually something that I really wish a book would explore. Within the Legends continuity, at least, there was a few different corps within the Jedi, in addition to the ones like Obi-Wan who are going out and doing those missions. There's also the medical corps and there's the exploration corps, which is mapping the unknown regions. And I just think that kind of a Star Trek-ish kind of story, with that would be something that would be really fun for an author to do if the exploration corps is still canon in the current era. I don't know if it is or not, but yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering, did you watch Acolyte?
I started it. I didn't love it. But there was that aspect a bit of that, and I did appreciate that.
Okay. I wondered if you got to those sequences where they're taking soil samples and taking plant samples and those sorts of things. Because that's the only time I remember seeing it.
But I did hear about that part, and I was just like, geez, you couldn't do that, in the episodes before I stopped watching. Anyways, to your question, there's some really cool things that you could be exploring that we don't see very often in Star Wars. In the majority of planets that we go to in Star Wars, the atmosphere is breathable, not just to humans, but to a bunch of other species, with some exceptions like Doran with the Keldor and Plo Koon. He's wearing a breath mask. In Legends, at one point, Luke and Ben Skywalker, not Solo, his son Ben, they end up on Doran. And so then they're having to use breath masks there. And that's really, really cool. Just sort of, I wish that they would do more of, when things are a little bit inconvenient, because space is extremely inconvenient all the time.
Right.
So Yeah, a lot of the planets, have an atmosphere that's breathable to a bunch of species. It seems like the gravity is about the same with all those planets.
Right.
So it seems like they have an easier time of things than we do, in our solar system, which is fine. I mean, I understand it. I'm usually very willing to accept within science fiction when things are muddy scientifically just because you need it that way for the story to work. I'm willing to be like, yeah, most of the planets you can breathe on and the gravity seems to be about the same everywhere because it would hinder the story to have it otherwise.
Right.
But the faster than light travel, it hasn't really been explained very much until we get to the High Republic, which I really enjoyed. There's a lot of it's a given that, you can communicate across, these really long distances. And I would assume that there is some kind of, relay system that's set up. I was watching Rogue One, loving Rogue One. I still love it, but I did kind of laugh when they receive a communication in hyperspace, because up until that point, you can't receive communications in hyperspace. And that's been a plot point for several books and stuff like that. But it is something that's kind of yeah, I don't have the first idea of how that would work, that as you are traveling faster than light, that a message
catches you.
How is that? Yeah, that means that the message is also traveling faster than light, or the message is sitting on a beacon that you are zooming past, and in the split second that you're zooming past it, you are able to have that uplink, downlink that, we have with the rovers, and, it needs to be there for enough time for that data to pass through. So they have very sophisticated methods of that, evidently, that they are able to, send and receive instantaneously.
Right. And it's down whenever you need it to be down for plot reasons, right?
Yeah. So yeah, it's, there's not a whole lot of hard science in it in terms of exploration. I do really enjoy when they do go into that a little bit. I really enjoyed with the new Jedi Order series, how Danny Kui is a scientist. She is a xenobiologist. She's an astrobiologist. And she's a main character of that series. And it's funny to, see that in Star Wars, because, what does that even look like? If you're already all over the galaxy, what is a xenobiologist? Well, a xenobiologist is studying life outside of the galaxy then.
Was she a part of the Exgal Society, the extragalactic planets, and they were mapping out a planet that is one of the first to get hit by the Vong terraforming, and she survived that? So that's they're doing space exploration. They're mapping out, a new world. And
yeah, I wish that there were more scientists in Star Wars.
Yeah.
I think that is a really interesting, thing to explore. And I feel probably part of the reason that it hasn't been is because so much of the technology that we see in Star Wars is very hand wavy of just it just works. Don't question it. It's if you bring an engineer into this, they're going to have a hard time because the technobabble is, there's just nowhere to start.
Right, exactly. Love to see more. I'm thinking definitely about the older, when people on Coruscant first started traveling off planet or other things. That would be a really interesting thing to know, because you mentioned Star Trek too. It's you see so much of that there. I would love something to explore a little bit about a new planet that connects or something like that. That would be super interesting. The equivalent of rovers. And I mean, we see it a little bit with the Imperial probe droid, and it's something that I always like seeing because, I don't know, I used to watch this show Tactical to Practical on, I think, the History Network before it went all aliens or whatever, where it was how much of a technology we take for granted we use to look at cat videos was actually funded and originally developed for the military. And so I feel in the Imperial era, you might actually get a lot of really cool tech then in the next few generations, that you're using for not warfare.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as early exploration, there's a book called Dawn of the Jedi, Into the Void, and it takes place on Tython tens of thousands of years before the movies. And
cool.
It is before there is hyperspace travel. There is faster than light travel, but there's not hyperspace travel. So it starts on Tython, and there's only a few planets that they go to because it just takes so long. And the space travel in that is much more similar to what we have here and what we, understand things like trips to Mars will be. That is very much in that line of things are still really early. The technology is not great. It is, duct taped together basically, going from planet to planet. And it is an interesting look at pre-hyperspace travel.
Cool. But I always think I'm, a biologist, love thinking about critters and stuff like that. So I don't know if you've watched this like YouTube series, the Galaxy Explorers or whatever, but they have like a little, it's basically a droid going out and doing the exploration and filming, creatures on other planets and stuff like that. And that really rings true to me. It's just like slightly sentient trail camera kind of thing or whatever. So it's like, that's probably the way they would explore, to go off and send a droid somewhere.
And that's so much of like space exploration here is like it makes more sense to send rovers and orbiters for the money that it costs. The amount of science that you can get out of an orbiter or a rover is so much more for the price tag than it is to send people. Like, it'd be great. I would love to have people explore Mars. However,
first,
like it is much cheaper to do Mars sample return of, collect these samples with the rover and then launch them back to Earth than it would be to send people to go physically pick up samples and bring them back with them in a rocket like that. Yeah,
for sure.
So that absolutely does ring true of that. It does make more sense to send a droid.
Yeah.
Mars obviously has a different geology than Earth. What are some of the differences, and then how would that compare to like Tatooine?
Tatooine,
or other dry planets like Jeddah or Geonosis. I know everyone goes back to Tatooine, but
this is just my own damage. I'm so tired of Tatooine, but obviously in this particular case, we can start there.
So the geology on Mars is actually not that different than the geology on Earth, because if you think about it, as far as we know, the elements are the same throughout the entire universe, because they're, you look at the periodic table and up to a certain point, these elements are created by stars. You go hydrogen to helium, and then you just keep going down the periodic table until you hit a point where then they are created by supernovas rather than the like normal processes of the stars burning into heavier and heavier elements. So you have the same elements, and those elements are going to create the same minerals as long as you have similar conditions. And with a terrestrial planet like Mars, the starting place for Mars and the starting place for Earth were very similar conditions. And Mars had a significant amount of water at one point, and how it became so dry. It's interesting with Tatooine, because I haven't looked so much into this with Jeddah, but I think it is the same just because both Tatooine and Jeddah were filmed on Earth. So like there is evidence of water-driven geology in both of those places. Like the Lars homestead is a salt flat. To create a salt flat, you need to have a lot of water to then dry up and all of that salt to precipitate out of. And, like the canyons where we see the pod race and where Luke gets beat up by the Tusken Raider and Obi-Wan rescues him, like those are all water-driven erosion canyons. On Mars, we see Valles Marineris, which is extremely huge compared to the Grand Canyon here on Earth. That started with rifting, but then water-driven erosion definitely also played a role in that. So how Mars lost its water and how that might apply to how Tatooine and Jeddah and other desert planets lost their water. So Mars is a terrestrial rocky planet. Whatever star was here before our sun, when it went supernova and cast all of those elements out into what is our solar system, and then they started to gather up just because of gravity and the spin that was created by the supernova. You have an accretion disk, planets start to form, and you get rocky planets closer in just because those are the elements that are stable closer to the new forming star. And then the gas giants are further out in the solar system because they are made of ice of different gases. So that needs to be further out from that heat. So at their core, both Earth and Mars have an iron core. And on Earth, and in the beginning with Mars, that iron core was liquid and it was churning. And it's still churning here on Earth. That's why we have the magnetic field. That's why compasses work. And most importantly, we have the magnetosphere because of that, which is an electromagnetic charge that is around the entire Earth. And that protects us from radiation. Because Mars is so much smaller, that liquid iron core solidified much more quickly. And when that thermal dynamo stopped and it stopped churning, it lost its magnetic field. We know that Mars had a magnetic field because we can see magnetism in the rock, but it's not there anymore. We know it did exist, but it's gone now. And without that magnetic field, without that magnetosphere, then everything that gets spewed out of the sun just came and ripped off the vast majority of Mars's atmosphere, and then the water was no longer stable on the planet's surface anyways. There might be water underground on Mars. We don't really know. The InSight lander that drilled down and did some seismology work, and we did see signs of a liquid under the surface. We did not get down as deep as we wanted to with that. It hit something that we sent like the best drill we possibly could send. It hit something harder than that drill. We just had bad luck with where that thing landed. Maybe someday we'll have the funding to send another one and it'll go better. We were still able to get some data out of that. And one of the things that it did show was that there is a liquid in some parts under the surface.
So Mars might have like a kind of gooey center, like nougat or something. Caramel, like a Mars bar.
Like a Mars bar. Well, the liquid iron core is no longer a gooey center, but maybe like subsurface. There's some caramel under the surface.
I like that was your question, and then I was going to ask about like if the magnetic field swapped.
Oh,
like
I was also going to ask about that. Like on Earth, every 20,000 years it swaps. Yeah. Did it swap on Mars?
Yeah, I'm not a paleomag person, but I think that we have seen some signs of that. Like we can't say for sure just because we don't have enough data, which is another reason that it'd be super great to bring samples back from Mars.
Right. Yeah, we know how to find these answers. Because I only just learned that you can tell that in the rocks. Like, so when I was in Iceland last year, there's an interpretive sign at this mountain we were looking at. And it was like, oh, here are the layers. You know, and this one took, if it is 20,000 years, like James said, it's like, this is when north was the north we know. And then like, here's where north was the south we know. And like, that just blew my mind that you can pick up a rock and like study it or in such a way that you know which way the magnetic field on Earth was pointing when it was laid down.
Yeah, I love that. That's one of the things that I love about geology is it's stuff that is so simple that gives you these profound answers about our history. Like, yeah. So that's what happened to Mars's water. I think that something different happened to Tatooine's water and Jedda's water because they're still running around breathing the atmosphere and it's okay. Whereas, you know, with Mars, you can't, like, there's not enough atmosphere left for you to be able to breathe it. I remember, I don't know, some theory I was reading on the internet at some point that was like, you know, Luke just repeatedly gets his butt kicked on Tatooine and then he leaves Tatooine and he's like great at things. What if Tatooine just like doesn't have a lot of atmosphere and so like he leaves Tatooine and now he has like way more oxygen and that's why he's
also makes his voice less whiny. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Yeah.
I was thinking that Jeddah might be a Mars pre-atmospheric blow-off, that it's on its way to that, but in the meantime, it can support humanish life. You know, obviously they've had it a long time. We see those ruins and the catacombs that Saw is in and some native life, but give it another couple million years and it might be like Mars, only with
and a really big crater on one side. Yeah.
And I wonder what the effect of that test of the Death Star would have on like atmospheric conditions and stuff like that. You know, I mean, that was when they were testing the first atomic bomb. They were like, well, we might just set the atmosphere on fire and kill everybody on the planet. That was a concern.
And it made me think of the question too, political funding, right? So that Death Star didn't last very long and they immediately had to start building another one. You know, was there ever a plan of like, you know, once we test these things, does someone stay behind or a probe stay behind and study what happens to the planet? I mean, they're using it for nefarious purposes, but if they're like, oh, we can use 1/10 of the blast and recharge quicker or whatever and still totally screw this planet over without actually breaking it into Alderaanian pieces or whatever, you know, would they do that? But then it's like, oh, I don't want to, you know, trigger you here. It's like, but that gets zeroed out because now they got to go build a second one or whatever. So it's like, oh, anyone who was planning on being the like follow-up crew. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, no, that probably would be a question that they want to determine is, you know, because they wanted the resources that Jeddah had. They wanted the Kyber. So, you know, you would want to see how that blast, like, does that destroy not just, you know, what it vaporizes of the Kyber, but if the Kyber is underground in that blast, like, because you can have like shocked metamorphism and stuff like that. You can change rocks by things like explosions. The Kyber that was around that site that wasn't vaporized, was that changed in a manner that it no longer has the properties that they want out of it for their weapons?
Right. Yeah, or did it open up the planet in such a way that now mining it is super easy? Right. And they're like, oh, cool, any other planet with Kyber in it, let's just go use this one setting or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. You have to keep this one setting, otherwise all of the Kyber is useless. Now I'm thinking of Gorman and their need for deep substrated foliated calcite. Like if they hit it too hard, it won't be foliated anymore.
Right.
Yeah. Politics of geology is absolutely a thing.
Yeah.
And there's absolutely a lot of ethics of geology that can get really messy.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it too. You know, we're talking more about like sort of how the Imperials use, obviously, the Death Star is one question, but for Force users, if any of you who are in the like NASA program and the Mars program, we're going on gut feelings or, oh, I feel a connection, you know, to this planet or whatever. So like Force sensitive people exploring space or interacting, you know, with new planets and stuff like that, like how that would sort of change the dynamic.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It would be great to be able to like reach out with the Force and determine, you know, where I could tie this into, you know, what I do with Mars. So like remote sensing is that's what we're doing with rovers, orbiters, et cetera. That all falls into the category of remote sensing because, you know, we're not there. So we are remote. Basically, yeah, we are trying to reach out with the Force basically and determine, you know, what's going on here, except we're doing it with science. So the Mast Camera and Mastcam Z that I've worked on / work on is a multispectral imager, which means that we can, with the photos that we take, we have different filters that we can put over the lens of the camera, or I guess under the, anyways. We have a filter set that is at different nanometer wavelengths of light. It filters for those. And we can look at that spectral data of what those band passes are and use that to determine what the mineral composition is of the rock or the soil or whatever that is in that image. So we are using tools to sense, you know, what these things are and being able to not use a spectrometer for that and just, you know, like look for hydrated minerals, you know, like reach out with the Force and try to feel that water within them, you know, like that's, yes, I would love to see more Force sensitive scientist characters who do really break it down. Oh yeah, like when I'm using the Force, this is how, you know, like I'm looking for it. I think that is a thing with the Jedi in general. Like, you know, obviously they are really well educated. I think you would have to have a very good understanding of the natural world to be able to sense these things because you have to think about what the tells are, you know, of whatever it is that you're looking for.
It might be a good, easy way to be like, is there life on this planet? Well, I can sense a lot of life, so let's go check it out versus I don't sense anything. Maybe we'll put that lower on the list.
Yeah, I was definitely thinking of The Last Jedi where he's like, you know, reach out, what do you feel or whatever. And she like can tell the bones underneath the surface. It's like, oh, perfect. You don't need an archaeologist or a paleontologist. You're like, oh, they're over there. You know, you don't need the equipment to get in there. And then she's also sensing the like evil water spout or whatever. And it's just, yeah, it's like, oh, you could just do that. But then, I mean, I know you didn't watch all of the Acolyte or whatever, but they do all of this collecting plants and samples and whatever. And then it's like, there's these other Force users like just down the road on this planet and yet they can't reach out and find them for months or whatever. So it's also like, I feel like it failed you then. So again, plot.
You know, no one could sense Palpatine standing right in front of them. So Dark Sky's good for something. But now I'm wondering with your spectral cameras, could you find the crew of the Ghost because they're, you know, Spectres 1 through 6.
Oh, there's our pun. Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
James coming out here with the dad jokes.
Yeah, there's little hints and stuff there, but I would love more explanation. I'm sure, like you say, Catherine, well, we couldn't get too far into it. It's like, I think we could, you know, just get someone to create a new periodic table. You know, it includes things we know when convenient, and then also includes, you know, unobtainium or whatever you want to call it in Star Wars, Kyber, maybe, you know, something like that, just to explain these other things.
Yeah, well, because we do still have elements missing on our periodic table that you could, you know, push these things in on. But also, like, if we did have a different periodic table in the Star Wars universe, that would, I'm not against it, but the implications of that are insane. That would be wild.
Yeah.
Going back to just exploring locations, what is exploring gas giants like? If we went to Bespin or Yavin, how would you go about exploring those? What would you do?
What I thought would be super fun for the sequel trilogy, because, you know, we have Luke's lightsabers back in play. So exploring gas giants, one of the really difficult things about them is that there is a ton of radiation. And that is not great for cameras or any kind of scientific instrument. So that is a struggle. I say that, like, oh yeah, there's a lot of radiation and it's horrible and it sucks. But what we think probably one of the best candidates for there being life within our solar system right now currently could be Europa, which is a moon of Jupiter. Europa is so interesting to us because it is water plus, et cetera, ice, very thick shell of that over this moon. And there is definitely liquid water underneath. And we believe that there is geologic activity because we have seen plumes coming off of it. So that is a really good sign that there is a liquid core. It is also very close to Io, which is the most volcanically active body in our solar system. It is close enough that what is coming off of Io from the volcanic eruptions is hitting the surface of Europa, which be providing nutrients into that system, which is really important. And the Europa Clipper currently still has its funding. I hope to any higher power that is out there that it gets to keep it, is on track to go orbit and try to give us some more answers. Hopefully at some point we can have, I say a lander, but it would be like nothing that we've had before, because what we really would want to do is something that can hit and drill down into the ice and get to the ocean that's underneath. We could figure out the technology for it. It's just a matter of funding. But anyways, back to your question of gas giants. The gas giants themselves, big pile of yikes, because of all that radiation. But, with the moons that are orbiting it, if you have something like a big icy shell around it, like you could potentially have some stuff that's hanging out in the water. Or there could be some real freaky stuff that is just adapted to that much radiation. You could have some sort of magnetosphere around Bespin or whatever, that is protecting it from the radiation. In fact, what I was saying about what I thought would be super fun for the sequel trilogy, gas giants are cold. I would guess that if you were to drop a human hand and a lightsaber, evidently it was in some sort of stable pattern. It didn't just go straight down into the gas giant and be crushed into the core. Evidently it was orbiting if the lightsaber was retrievable. So you would have a flash frozen Luke Skywalker hand and the lightsaber. And one of the, completely unhinged things about Legends that I actually, enjoy was that, crazy as it is, you had a clone who was cloned off of Luke's severed hand in the Thrawn trilogy. And it was, very 90s is how it was done. I love it. It's goofy. But I was like, if Snoke wanted the power of a Skywalker, but he did not want the whininess of a Skywalker, you want a female Skywalker then. There's not one of those running around who's young enough to be corruptible. Leia's not, she's not doing that, obviously. But you do have this great genetic sample of Luke that you could definitely either scientifically or with the Force mess around with those chromosomes. Assuming that he has an XY chromosome, you could just get, 2 X chromosomes off of that and clone-ish Rey off of that.
Right.
That would be really interesting. She's kind of his daughter, but not by any choice of his. I just think that would have been really fun to explore. And it would have explained a lot of why she's just super powerful from the get-go. Because I would assume that, Snoke would also just ramp up the midichlorians and whatnot. So basically, yeah, that was my Rey as a GMO theory. That was my, if I was in charge, this is the story that I would have told. Because I think that would have been really interesting. But yeah, gas giants are messy, but I guess you could, flash freeze a hand in them if you wanted to.
Now I'm trying to figure out how to make a magnetosphere for a gas giant, because I was thinking Star Trek, oftentimes when they dip into gas giants, they are really radioactive.
You just have to reverse something, reverse the tachyons or, reverse
but it's if you had a lot of basically gaseous ferromagnetic materials, could that work?
I'm sure there is something that you could do, especially with the Star Wars technology that there is. I assume that it's possible and that there's something going on with Bespin that allows it to not just be radioactive soup.
It's interesting because I hadn't really thought about it before, but when he falls out the bottom, he is in open atmosphere. Well, and they land on the platform that's outdoors or whatever too. I hadn't really even thought about that.
Yeah, he's still breathing oxygen, I guess.
Right. There's enough atmosphere for Lando's cape to billow, when he's walking out. Yeah. So,
well, maybe the reason, Cloud City is so big, there's a city on top, but there's this huge thing. And maybe that is what creates the magnetic shield to protect everyone from radiation, maybe trap in some oxygen and maybe less of the nasty gases like the Tibanna. So they have to go outside that to go get the Tibanna.
Yeah, I could see that. I'd never really thought about it before, because when you were talking earlier about the like breathing mask, is making me think of like the asteroid. That was the only time I think I can remember, you know, our main character sort of wearing it. And it's not attached to anything, mind you. It's literally just a mask with like a hose sticking out the bottom. But it's like, hey, those exist, right? And they show them in the sequel trilogy. Like those are on hand, ready to go, but they don't use them in that case.
Now I'm thinking, going back to Plo Koon, he's in his own starfighter. You think he'd pump in his own natural breathable gas rather than using the oxygen mask and then using the breath mask. But maybe, I don't know if it's surgically attached and he can't take it off or...
No, I think he can take it off, but I would just assume that you wouldn't want to deal with that even, you know, here, like fighter pilots, they have oxygen, you know, mask. I would think that, you know, like if you were to land on a planet, you wouldn't want to then be like, oh wait, you know, let me put this on, you know.
Right. Oh, and then lose everything once you open the canopy and...
Yeah.
Okay. Makes sense.
But I would assume that like in his quarters, you know, and stuff like that, like it would be nitrogen there rather than oxygen rich environment.
Right, because don't they talk about that for like the Mon Calamari or something like that? Different gravitational, you know, things or whatever.
Yeah, that's a whole other question of just like the different styles of rooms within the Jedi Temple, since you have so many species, like, and what all their different needs are. Like with the Mon Cal, they breathe oxygen and they can be walking around in the air, but they do need... In the Jedi Apprentice books, one of Obi-Wan's like childhood best friends is a Mon Cal, and like it talks about her like needing to go swim in the lake, like to just so her skin doesn't dry out too much, and that like her quarters like are higher humidity to keep her skin okay.
Yeah. Same with Jar Jar, right?
Yeah.
So, tell us please about your favorite Star Wars character.
My favorite Star Wars character is Mara Jade. I really love her story arc of being raised as, you know, the Emperor's hand, the Emperor's personal assassin, basically, and just not knowing anything else. And that was a hot mess, you know? And then when the Emperor dies and the Empire falls apart, she doesn't have anything. Like she doesn't even really exist in any kind of legal sense, you know, because she was this secret assassin, and her trying to find her way in the galaxy and then, you know, bumping into the original trilogy and Lando and Chewie, and just kind of her like feral cat era where Leia and everybody are just kind of like, hey, and she's, you know, hissing and spitting, you know, like I really enjoy that, like the narrative never punishes her for her anger about everything, you know, towards the characters that are the heroes or the, you know, original trilogy. But like from her perspective, like they destroyed everything. And yeah, I really love her story arc of coming through all of that and like figuring out who she wants to be as a person.
Cool. Well, if someone's interested in getting into your field, how would you recommend going about that?
Yeah. So my own path to NASA was geology. I do definitely recommend that as a way to get into it. I do really recommend my undergrad university, Western Washington University. And just in general, like for anybody going into STEM, choosing a college, I would say looking at a medium-sized school, like the one that I went to was known as a liberal arts university primarily, but they also have a really strong STEM program. And since they don't have a lot of grad students, I was able to do a lot more research than most undergrads would be able to. And that's really what propelled me into being able to get a job right out the gate, was that I was presenting at research conferences and making all of these connections. Don't automatically go to the big research institution in your home state. Like it probably, you know, is a good school, but most of the research there is going to go to the graduate students. So looking at something that's more medium-sized really could benefit you in that way of being able to do research. The way that I started with my professor was I was told that, you know, she was coming here from JPL, finishing her postdoc there. I had her name, so I looked up her research papers over that summer. I read them all. First day of class, I was at her door, you know, introducing myself and being like, hey, I really want to do research with you. I read all your papers. I have these questions, you know, just, yeah, like being really proactive in that way you need to find your Jedi Master, to walk you through this. Geology is a great way to go into space science. You know, make sure that you do still have a good physics background, just because that's a really good thing to pick up. If you can take some photography classes as well, just like something that is focused on like how cameras operate. That was like a big blank spot that I had in my education that I think would be beneficial to fill, since that is so much of what space exploration is with cameras.
Cool. Well, tell us a little bit about Legacy Expo.
Yeah, so Legacy Expo is going to be at the Burbank Marriott Convention Center September 13th and 14th. It is celebrating the expanded universe, so that's the books, comics, games, etc. That was all the pre-Disney era of that. And this is not a place where we're hating on Disney. It is really, a welcoming and inclusive place for everybody, no matter like where you are in the Star Wars fandom, celebrating primarily the books and comics, but also the games. We have a bunch of really fantastic authors coming. James Lucino and Matt Stover are our headliners. It's going to be a lot of fun just talking about their contributions to the Star Wars universe. We have a really cool exhibit hall full of vendors and as well as like displays that you can look at. Lots of book signings, lots of panels. We're going to do some gaming, some tabletop RPGs. There's going to be live performances from Saber Guild. Yeah, just 2 days of a lot of Star Wars, just a celebration of the fandom and, the books and comics that we love.
Awesome.
Very cool. And maybe you'll see Melissa and me as well.
Yes, very much looking forward to that. I'm excited. Thanks for including us. Cool. Well, thanks so much for being here, Catherine. This was a really awesome subject, and I've written down like 10 more spin-off ideas of subjects just based on this conversation. So love it when that happens.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That wraps up this episode of Star Warsologies. We want to thank our guest, Catherine Winchell, and we want to thank all of you for listening.
Come see us at Legacy Expo in Burbank, California over September 13th and 14th. We're going to be on a couple panels there, as well as hosting some panels. We will be doing a Star Wars Critters panel.
Yes, come check us out. The Critters panel is Saturday at 1:20 p.m. And I am also moderating a Creators Favorites panel with a bunch of authors and writers of Star Wars Legacy stuff. And that is at 5:10 p.m. on Saturday, September 13th.
And for my panels at Legacy Expo, we have a spotlight with Karina Becko on Saturday morning at 11 and an author spotlight with Michael Stackpole at 4:20 in the afternoon. On Sunday, we're going to do a Brian Daly appreciation panel for the author of those classic Han Solo books way back in the day. That's at 11. And at 1:30, a author spotlight with Barbara Hambly.
Looking forward to seeing you at Legacy Expo.
We got something special to announce. Our friends at Galaxy Tours, which do Star Wars and Indiana Jones tour site visits in Tunisia, have a special Science of the Galaxy Far, Far Away group tour coming up.
Yes, November 11th through 14 of 2025. The Galaxy Tours is putting on a cool special tour that's going to have special guest Lee Bullock, who's a physicist and lifelong Star Wars collector, along for the ride, giving scientific insights along the way during visits to all of the really cool filming sites in Tunisia.
Yep, they'll be visiting such places as the Skywalker and Lars homestead, where the Mos Espa slave quarters are, as well as the Mos Espa kind of town site, plus a few things from Indiana Jones. But this is your chance to go and also hear from a scientist.
We're hoping these will be a success, and there'll be more science-based Galaxy tours coming up in the future, and hopefully us and some of our awesome Star Warsology scientists can get more involved. If you do decide to sign up for this 4-day tour in Tunisia, make sure you leave a note in the order notes on the final page of the checkout saying that you heard about it from Star Warsologies, and that way they'll know that we sent you.
Make your reservation at galaxytours.com.
Yeah, check it out. Hopefully James and I get to go at some point. I really, really want to go to Tunisia. You stay overnight at like Luke's homestead, drink blue milk. I like it says binary sunset ambiance, since obviously there's actually only one sun on Earth, but it just sounds like a really magical time. So if you check that out, make sure you send us lots of pictures.
Looking for the links and others that we talked about, check out our show notes page available at skywalkingthrough-neverland.com/star-warsologies. Also check out our Star Warsologies YouTube channel, where we post some episodes with related visuals from Star Wars.
If you have an idea for a topic for Star Warsologies, or you know an expert we should interview, let us know at Star Warsologies on Instagram and Blue Sky, or at Star Warsologies, StarWarsologies @gmail.com. And we also have a fan group on Facebook, so come join us at the Star Warsologies podcast fan group and chat with us and your fellow listeners.
No topic is off limits. Even if a newscaster made a red wine on Leia's home planet, would it be called an Alderaan Burgundy? Please also rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite service and share it with your friends. My first book, Star Wars Crossword Puzzles and Other Word Games from a Galaxy Far, Far Away, is available at your local bookstore or on bookshop.org, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other online booksellers.
We are part of the Skywalking Network, where you can find a variety of other great shows about Star Wars, Disney, and Marvel, including the Neverland Clubhouse and the flagship show Skywalking Through Neverland. There's also a YouTube show called Today in Star Wars History. You can find all of that at skywalkingnetwork.com. Join us next time on Star Warsologies when we talk about mass media and media literacy in Star Wars.